this?
We're going to look at Revelation chapter 17 tonight. Another one of those easy passages. I mean, this is just, we're in kindergarten when you get to the book of Revelation. Easy stuff, there's no controversy. Everybody agrees, and we can all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. One thing I want to keep in mind as we go through this is the opening chapter, the opening verse gives us the paradigm for interpretation of the book of Revelation. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants the things which must soon take place. And he sent and communicated it by his angel to his bondservant John. Okay? That word there, communicated, means to communicate or to instruct through symbols. And you see that the book of the Revelation is full of symbols. So when we get to chapter 17 and you see a woman and you see a beast, what should you assume? That this is not a literal woman and this is not a literal beast. These aren't fictional or science fictional characters. We understand that they symbolize something. Just like in chapter 12, when you meet a woman there clothed in white, you assume this is not a literal woman. She symbolizes something. And on you could go, but the point is in all of this is that this book is very symbolic in its essence and nature. And so let us not forget that. So we come to chapter 17 and we meet a woman. And let me just tell you and preface it this way, okay? Our world puts a lot of emphasis on the external, don't they? I mean, you know, look at the magazines and television shows and total makeovers and all the money spent on clothes and makeup, and the men in the room are groaning right now. But we focus on the external, okay? And what we come to find out is that beauty is oftentimes just skin deep in our culture. I mean, I have met some attractive people who are very ugly people in reality, okay? I'm not naming any names or pointing fingers, okay? But that's right. That's right. And you just think about it. Now the girls love the Disney movies. If you've seen the movie or maybe read the book, because I'm not into those things, but Beauty and the Beast. The Beast is a guy who was all that he should have been on the outside, but on the inside was ugly. And what happened because of the ugliness that was on the inside, suddenly through this magic spell, it comes out. Okay? He becomes the beast he is on the inside. When you see this woman, you're going to see someone who is physically attractive and appealing. But that beauty is deceptive. It is alluring. And so let's just look there. Revelation chapter 17, and you meet this alluring woman here. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality." And so the first point I want to get is the seductive nature of this woman. Did you notice how seductive she is? Her influence is worldwide. It's pervasive. Okay? She seduces many. The picture is that she sits on many waters. Now I want you to look at the very end of the chapter, verse number 18 of chapter 17. "The woman whom you saw is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth." Back up one verse. "For God has put it in their hearts to execute this purpose. by having a common purpose and giving the kingdom to the beast, and to the words of God until the words of God will be fulfilled. The picture of this woman ultimately is one who has influence over others. She makes the peoples of this world drunk with her wine. Okay? Now, I don't know how streetwise this group is. Okay? I don't know how informed you are, especially when it comes to being first century streetwise. But in the first century, okay, prostitutes dressed a certain way. They would wear clothing that was accentuated and made them stand out. Gold, jewelry, flashy things to catch your attention and to allure you. That's exactly how this prostitute is shown, this woman who is a prostitute. She is physically attractive. She is alluring. Notice verse number 4. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of the abominations. We'll get to that in just a minute. But here's the picture you need to get. She's attractive, okay? And she's seductive. And people are drinking the wine and getting drunk. Look at verse number 2. With whom the kings of the earth commit acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth, that's unbelievers, were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. Now what does wine do? It has an inebriating effect. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands this evening, but if you ever spent, I'm a pagan, I'll be honest with you. God saved me, a sinner, by His grace. I was in a casino. Yes, your pastor has been in one. And as I sit there, I noticed something as I watched and looked around. You know what they're serving up freely? All the alcohol you can drink. Okay? Because that alcohol has an effect on those who are sitting there. It lowers the inhibitions so that they are free to spend their money in those casinos. That's the effect that this woman has. She has seduced the world. Okay? The world has come under her spell. She's cast a spell on the whole world. Now, I believe that this woman is, again, not a literal woman, but she represents something for us. She represents false worship and also economic prosperity. Two things that really go hand in hand, worship and the economy. And so this woman, decorated as she has a seductive power over the peoples of this world, the unbelievers. Notice that's a really clear mark here. With whom the kings of the earth commit acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth. Church, who is the earth dwellers? The unbelievers, those whose names are not written in the book of life. This woman cast a spell over those people. And then you see this picture. Look at verse number 3. And he carried me away in the Spirit into a wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. Okay? So where's John when he sees this beast? He's in the wilderness. That should ring bells for us and make lights flash and remind us of another experience in the wilderness. Back in chapter 12, you remember when the dragon is coming after the people of God? Where do the people of God go? They go out into the wilderness, and there they are protected. This little connection, this little tidbit of information you see here in chapter 17 shows us that God has taken John to a safe place so that he could view the harlot, the prostitute. Why? So that he wouldn't come under her influence. Can I tell you that this world makes a living seducing people? influencing people. And here's what we have to do. We have to be very careful that we don't fall under the same spell. We have to be protected by God in order to see things rightly. And so only from a certain vantage point can this woman really be discerned and seen as she really is. Only from a safe distance can he tell that though she is attractive and alluring, she is dangerous and she leads to destruction. She is a seductive woman. Now, she is a defiling woman. Notice what she does here. You can see this. Look at verse number 4. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of the abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality. Now that word abominations is only used a handful of times in the New Testament. Okay? You only find it a handful of times. You know where you find it the very first time? Jesus uses it in Matthew. That Olivet discourse where he's talking about the end of things. Remember? Matthew chapter 24, he's telling his disciples what's going to happen and how Jerusalem is going to come to utter ruin. And he says this. He says, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel, he says, you know what you need to do? You need to get out of town. Okay? So the temple's the holy place. Guess what? No Gentiles were allowed in there. Only perfect sacrifices were to be offered up in this holy of holy place. Well, in the abomination of desolation, what happens? Rome invades Jerusalem and the temple is desecrated. Guess what the Christians do? They listened to Jesus and they got out of town before Jerusalem actually falls. Well, that same word is used right here. Okay? This thing that makes someone filthy, this very much defiling reality. Let me give you a definition. Here it is from the lexicon. It is something that causes revulsion or extreme disgust. That is to say that this woman causes people to become disgusting in the presence of God. You know where else you see this? Look with me just a little further. Chapter 21. Another woman is described in chapter 21. The contrast could not be any clearer. Okay? Chapter 21, well, you see who the woman is. Verse number 9. I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And then the description follows. As the woman, Babylon, symbolizes God's, the rebellious people, the wife of the Lamb symbolizes God's precious people who have been redeemed. Now I want you to look down. Let me just show you the verse here. Look at verse number 27. And nothing unclean, and no one who practices abomination and lying shall ever come into it. Okay? So the city Babylon, this picture of a woman, she's full of abominations. In contrast, the city of God, the New Jerusalem, the bride of the Lamb, she is completely free of abominations. You see the contrast that John is drawing? It could not be any more clear to us that this woman defiles people. She seduces, she defiles, ultimately she destroys. She's a dangerous woman. Look down back in chapter 17. Let me show you how dangerous she is. Look at verse number 6. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of saints, and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Now, the question is, who is this, really? Well, my guess is that when John was writing it, he was writing it to his first century audience. Churches, Ephesus, and Smyrna, Pergamon, Thyatira, and you get the picture. And these churches, reading this letter, would have drawn one conclusion as to who this woman was. This Babylon was none other than Rome. They would have known that this was Rome. This is John's way of kind of speaking indirectly, but speaking directly at the same time. This was certainly Rome. Who was persecuting the Christians in the first century? It was Rome, okay? Who was causing people to be seduced into worshiping other gods other than Jesus alone? It was Rome, okay? And so the picture is very clear that this seductress Rome, with all its power and glory and splendor, this one is the dangerous one and must be viewed from a proper angle. In fact, you see that this woman is in fact dangerous. She murders God's people. She slays them, takes their life, drinks their blood, is the picture in this particular case. And so here's the issue, okay? This woman may be attractive, but she's defiling and dangerous. You know what the message is for Christians? Be careful who you associate with. This one who stands in opposition to God is, in fact, dangerous. Now let's kind of deal with some of the particulars. Now, I'll be honest with you. Some of this is hard to wade through. I don't pretend to have all the answers to it. Don't know it all. There's some questions that I certainly have and don't have clarified. One of these days I'm going to ask Jesus on some of this stuff. But it's very difficult. But her immorality is not literally sexual immorality. Okay? This chapter is about sex, but not about sex. Okay? It stands as a euphemism of rebellion against God. God, in the Old Testament, and His people were in a relationship, a covenant relationship that was likened unto marriage. And this covenant union where God had His people, His bride, and His people, were to be faithful to her. And what happened when God's people failed to be faithful to God? He called them a bunch of adulteresses. Well, this picture is the same thing. This immorality, this immorality of the sexual nature is spiritual in nature. False worship. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and of the abomination of the earth. Babylon stands for those things that are opposed to God, opposition to Christ, and seduce us to follow after other gods. In the first century, harlots would often have their names written across the forehead as an identifying mark so that you knew who they were. In the same way, this Babylon is clearly seen. Does that sound familiar to you? We see a lot of things on foreheads in the book of the Revelation, don't we? We see the mark of the beast, clearly marked, designated on the forehead. We see the seal of the Lamb, clearly designated on the forehead. And in fact, chapter 14 says, look back to chapter 14, verse 1. Then I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. There it is. It's clear again. When you look at Babylon from this certain perspective, you understand that this one is not for God and with God, but stands against God. Look at verse number 8. The beast, in chapter 17, the beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth, and here he defines who they are, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast, that he was and is not and will come. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and 1 has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain at a little while. And the beast, which was and is not, is himself also the 8th, and is one of the 7. And he goes to destruction. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. So the mate for this prostitute, this whore, as the Bible presents her, is none other than the beast. This red, scarlet-clothed beast, full of abominations, opposing God's people. And we see this beast as having 7 heads, 10 horns. Now, how you reconcile all these numbers is really beyond me. Okay? Many try to reconcile the kings and the emperors, counting back to Augustus or to Caesar, Julius Caesar. Some make it successive kingdoms, which would begin with Egypt. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't really come to any conclusions on this. You know what I conclude? I don't know, all right? I'll just be honest with you. I'm not certain about it. I don't think that John really gives me enough information where I can fully understand it and explain it in a way that makes sense. So here's what I say. It's a mystery in my book in some ways that I don't fully comprehend and fully reveal. But here is one important point in all this. In the midst of this detail, this is a political reality. Okay? It's kings and kingdoms. It's people in opposition to God. And guess what? What do you see? This is brief opposition. Verse number 14 tells us, these will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful ones. So here's the reality. Whatever you make of the kings or the kingdoms, the horns, and how we all come to an understanding of all that is not certain. But here's what we are certain of. That the power of Babylon comes to an end. That there is a greater king that rises up, Jesus. And with him, his people. Notice how they are denoted. They are called. They are chosen. And they are faithful. God's people are a particular people. Redeemed, called out, selected, marked, loved from eternity by God himself. And they are faithful. Hang on, we're almost done. Verse number 15. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw, the beast, these will hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and will burn her up with fire. So you see the ultimate ruin of this evil empire. What is it? It falls from within. I was about, I think, 3 or 4 years old. My dad passed out in our bathroom. Mom woke him up, said, I think I hear somebody outside. Sounds like a story from my house. And he goes to find out what's going on, and poof, he hits the floor, out cold. Well, she thinks somebody's killed her. She does the only thing that's right to do. Screams and runs the other direction. You know how that goes. Long story short, there was nobody outside. It was our dog. And we found out that night that my dad was a diabetic. Not a type 2 diabetic, which is common, but a type 1 diabetic. If you know anything about type 1 diabetes, it's an autoimmune disease. And what that simply means is that it is a disease in which your immune system turns on itself. Your body attacks itself. That's what you see in this picture here in Revelation chapter 17. That this woman's demise is her own evil. What she has sown, she reaps. The destruction is poured back on her. Now don't think it's just a law of consequence, even though God has put that in. Look at verse number 17. This is God's design. For God has put it in their hearts to execute His purpose, by having a common purpose, and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God will be fulfilled. That is to say that God brings it all about under His sovereign purpose. Now chapter 18 really reveals the end of this evil, wicked empire. Here's a couple of things that I need to remind you of. Number one, okay? Everything that glitters is not gold. And just because the world looks very attractive and alluring and appealing, just because the world offers economic security and pleasure and on we could go, listen to me, it does not mean that you and I need to be seduced by the things of this world. Look at the world from a particular angle. Look at it through the perspective of God's lens. Now, one more thing to remind you of. All the kingdoms of this world come to me. Kingdoms come, kingdoms go. Kings come and kings go. But one King that stands forever. His name is Jesus. Let's pray. Father God, we are reminded that the times and seasons are in your hands. Father, that there are some things that may be alluring and appealing to us in a sensual way, that do not bring you glory and that are not safe for us. God, I pray and ask for your grace that you would give us discernment to be able to see evil as it really is, to be able to know the difference between truth and error, to be able to distinguish the reality, the city of God and the city of man. Father, knowing the difference that one is temporal and one is eternal. Help us to flee to the city of God. Flee from the city of man. God, I pray that you would just help us to be the people who love Jesus and are not willing to compromise. Father, I'm reminded that this letter comes to churches who were facing compromise, who in their midst was the woman Jezebel, who called the people of God in the church to compromise. Father, I pray that this message would hit home to us, that we wouldn't be numbered among those. God, I pray that you keep us strong as your chosen, called out ones. Help us to be faithful.